A few years ago, we went on our very first solo overlanding trip in Kentucky, and it was almost our last because we were not prepared. Well, today we were back in Kentucky, and we're gonna show you a way to make sure that that never happens to you.
So she told you that we were going to try to teach you the things you need to know so that that never happens to you. So when we were in Land Between the Lakes solo by ourselves, we actually flipped the Jeep up on its side and snapped the rear track bar off the frame. So we didn't have ratchet straps. We didn't have any kind of tools needed to get us out of that situation. So we sort of just camped in the woods all weekend in the snow and waited till someone could save us. I don't ever want that to happen again. So babe, where are we today?
Today we are at Morrison's Outdoor Adventure, and we are with Mike, and he is going to show us or teach us a thing or two about recovery gear and about how to self-recover in the event of, well, a potential catastrophe. I'm here with Mike Morrison from Morrison's Outdoor Adventure, and Mike, tell us what it is that you guys do here.
So we teach off-road driving, recovery techniques, basically anything kind of to do with once your vehicle gets off pavement, whether it be field expedient repair, recovery, self-recovery, or even just driving techniques. That's what we teach. And then we also take people out on guided trips, trail rides, and all types of stuff.
Nice. So what are you going to do for us today?
So today we're going to learn about recovery gear. We're going to go and kind of look at some of your recovery gear, learn a little bit about that, as well as we're going to learn about some self-recovery techniques, and then look at kinetic recovery because that's a hot topic in the off-road recovery world.
Nice.
So,
perfect.
All right, Mike, this is my recovery bag. This is what we carry when we're typically off-roading. I would like for you to just kind of go through and tell us what's good, what's bad, what we need, what we don't need, and just some little details about what we're doing here.
all right, let's see what we got. So starting off, any good recovery does start with a good pair of gloves, right? So typically we go for something that has kind of like a padded leather right here, because if you're dealing with synthetic winch line, or if you're starting to deal with like steel cable or anything like that, a pair of gloves is really gonna protect you. But any of the fabrics like tree straps and stuff like that here on the East Coast pick up briars and brambles in the woods. So you want to have a good pair of gloves really protect your hands because we're always outdoors, right? I tend to go for the ones that do have Velcro on them like this because I like them to be secure. But sometimes if we're dealing with like hooks and stuff like that, the Velcro, just tuck it underneath so that you can get your hand out quick, right? But a good set of gloves is good.
So don't skimp on those.
Don't skimp on gloves, yeah. Make sure, and they're good fitting too, right? We don't want a big loose pair of gloves that we can't really work with. Next thing is a good radio is super important in recovery. We don't really think about communication when we're recovering, but if you're outside the vehicle or you're driving and Jeremy's outside the vehicle, how are you guys going to communicate? Because whoa and go sound the same if you're yelling. If he says turn left, his left is different from your left. So radios can help a lot in keeping that clear, right? Or hand signals, but either one. Typically I like radios because it takes a lot of the confusion out of it, right?
Okay. Very nice.
I feel like we're on the right track, babe.
Don't get too excited.
Right.
Now, when we start kind of thinking about recovery, a lot of people don't think about air pressure in tires, right? But adjusting the air pressure in our tires can change how hard a recovery may be, especially if we're in soft surfaces like sand, mud, snow. Airing down, we can get a lot more traction with the vehicle, but people just don't think about it. So I grew up in North Carolina, used to go to the Outer Banks a lot, and we'd come up a lot of sand driving. We'd come up on a stuck vehicle. First thing we would always do is check air pressures and lower those air pressures down. So having that ability to do that quick in your kit, and part of my recovery kit also includes a way to air up if I need to, but also a way to fix a tire if I need to. So being able to adjust those air pressures is super important. Now, the first part of starting a good recovery kit is always going to be a tree strap, right? Not to be confused with like a Snatch strap or a Kinetic strap. But a good tree strap is the main part that we're kind of looking for. Now, choosing the right tree strap can be a little scary, right? Because there's a lot of options out there. But one of the first things we're looking for is we are looking for a rating on there, right? We want that rating to be minimum brake strength is what we're looking for, or MBS a lot of times, and it'll tell us basically what that tree strap was pull tested to and what it failed at. Lengthwise is super important because we don't want a 30-foot tree strap because then you're going to wrap it multiple times around a tree.
Right.
We only want one wrap around a tree at most in a basket configuration. So 6 to 12 foot is kind of my recommendation. Anything longer than that's just kind of a waste, right?
So I think that's kind of a cheapo, and you can look at that and see that what does it list? Is it listing maximum brake strength?
It says maximum capacity on there.
So typically your cheapos, your Harbor Freights and things like that are going to have that, right?
Yes, they're going to rate by maximum brake strength, maximum capacity, or average brake strength. So we'll kind of show some different tags here in a little bit that you can kind of see. But a lot of times that's what we're looking for. And based on how we rig these, it can change the capacity, which is a little bit out there, right? The other thing we want to look at, and this is one good credit to this tree strap, right? Number one, it's wider than 2 inches. We want minimum of 3-inch width, right, for our trees. But look at how the stitching right here runs parallel with the strap. That's what we want. We don't ever want the stitching to run perpendicular back and forth. It makes a weaker strap.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
So it does have one good.
So there are some good qualities to it.
does. And the eyes here, so this is what we call a folded eye, right? So basically they take the width of the strap and they fold it in half. And personal preference, I like a folded eye. They're easiest to work with, right? You can have folded and twisted or twisted eyes. There's all kinds of different stuff out there. But this tends to be the easiest to work with, and always having some kind of abrasion guard on that eye because that's our wear point.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Let's see what else we
I
got.
feel like it's Santa's sack.
Soft shackles.
This is our big boy.
Yeah, so soft shackles, right, they've been out now for quite a while, right? 7, 8 years. We kind of took these from the sailing industry, even though we like to say, hey, we created these for the off-road industry. They actually came from the sailing industry, and they're made out of synthetic winch line, right? Now, here's where we have to be really careful with purchasing gear, and we need to make sure that we are purchasing it from a quality, reputable manufacturer, okay? Because you could go, I always make the joke in my recovery classes, you can go and buy it from mikesbasement.com, but we don't know what those were pull tested to, how they were tested, or if they were even tested at all, right? So we want to make sure that, number one, we're looking to make sure that they have a rating tag on them that has their working load limit or minimum brake strength on there, which this one is MBS, which is typically minimum brake strength. So we want to know what that rating is. Stay away from average brake strength or maximum brake strength, right? Any of those terms are going to give us a number that we can't really guarantee on. So we want that minimum brake strength. Another good thing some of these manufacturers are doing is they're actually putting how that should be rigged, right? Because when we rig with soft shackles, it's very important how they end up, right? We want to make sure that we're putting the load next to the knot there so that when I pull, the knot is pulling against the loop. Doesn't matter top or bottom, right? Or even which side, okay? But we don't ever want to put the load on the loop or with the loop in the center. We always want to put that load right next to that knot. And so they show that here, right?
Oh, that's cool.
Which is a good thing because, again, it's a good reminder, right?
And that's a Yankum, so it's
a good one, right? So, and having abrasion guards on it because...
And that's this, right?
Yep. 2 different types of abrasion guard right here. So you've got this Cordura sheave, but then they also have this rubberized coating right here so that we can get away with a little bit rougher edge with these. We still got to watch out for sharp edges and stuff like that, but we can put them in some different types of rigging and not have to worry about them getting cut or nicked as bad. So that's a good one. And so this one is minimum brake strength, 45,500 pounds, right? So that's well above.
Should be okay for the Jeep.
Should be good to go for the Jeep.
All right. I feel like you're not getting a bad grade right now, babe.
Oh, we're not done yet.
All right. So pulley blocks, right? Or snatch blocks, as we call them. So these in winching is where I really kind of tend to geek out because we can do all kinds of really cool stuff, right? We can do 2-to-1s, 3-to-1s, redirects. I mean, you can move way heavier loads using a snatch block. Now, snatch blocks are also where winching can get very complicated and we can start getting some real high spikes in weight. So we got to make sure, number one, that the rating on these is well above whatever double our winch capacity is. So if you have a 10,000 pound winch, we want a minimum of 20,000 pounds, right? As far as the rating. Now, not get too deep in the weeds. This isn't a bad one right here. This would kind of be what I would consider kind of a mid-tier. right? But notice a little bit here how it kind of spreads out when it's
Here.
pulled. Yeah. So you create a gap between what we call the cheeks or the sheaves of the pulley and the actual pulley. So the rope, if you have synthetic winch line, could actually get pinched in between there.
Gotcha.
And I'll share a picture with you guys so you can kind of see that. But you want one that stays nice and tight, right?
Gotcha. And that was probably a cheapo, and I wouldn't even know what brand that is.
Yeah, yeah. Doesn't even say a brand on it.
Yeah.
Now,
So,
one big benefit, and I like this, is I like a pulley block I can take apart and clean, right? Because we get mud in there, we get debris in there, and there's bearings in there. So if you can take it apart to clean it, that's a huge plus, right? And having
Gotcha.
it greasable.
I was going to say, it looks like it has a grease fitting.
Yeah. Now, that being said, most of the companies that ship these out and have grease fittings in them, they're not pre-greased,
Okay.
right? So you have to make sure that you kind of put some grease on them.
And I guarantee that's never been done.
No.
It was bought and thrown in that bag.
Yeah, yeah. So
All right, so good to know.
not that it's necessarily going to hinder your recovery, but you get a lot of friction loss out of it, right? So let's say we do in the industry what we call a 2-to-1, which is basically moving a much heavier load with it, or we're getting mechanical advantage out of it. It wouldn't truly end up being a 2-to-1. It'd be like a 1.7-to-1 or 1.8-to-1, right?
Because
So
you're
there's
losing some of
friction
that
loss.
slide.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it is very good that we can take this apart. You'll notice with different pulley blocks, there's going to be two types of pulleys. There's going to be a poly pulley, or kind of like a plastic pulley, and a metal. Metal is for only, it can do synthetic or steel cable, but don't mix them, right? Because once steel cable goes through here, it'll put burrs in it and it can tear up your synthetic winch line. The
Gotcha.
poly rollers are only for synthetic winch line.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, super important.
Which do you prefer?
I like the poly rollers, and I 100% only use synthetic winch line now. I don't do any steel cable anymore.
Okay, perfect.
There's a lot of argument about that out there, but there's a lot of pros to synthetic winch
Well, and I
line.
suppose that's real important for us to know as well. I mean, in our situation, we do use synthetic, but if we're out on the trail and someone has a metal line, then we use that.
I'm not gonna
Now
let
it's
them
going
mess up
to-
my-
Or we just, if they don't have one, we're like, oh, well, we can use ours, then we
Yeah.
need to know, hey, you're not gonna be able to use that again.
Yeah, and
So
you
that's-
can go
that's-
back and polish it up, but I mean, normally I carry one of each,
Okay.
right? So I can just be like, here you go. You know, we're gonna use this with your steel cable.
Okay.
There's still some kind of old school thought process out there, especially like the old school rock crawlers and rock bouncers. They're still using steel cable, but we're actually seeing now, number one, synthetic winch line's way cheaper than it used to be, right?
Yeah.
Number two, most people are finally catching on that, number one, it's not just the safety that makes it so great, right? It's field repairable. You cannot field repair a steel cable. If it breaks, right? Synthetic winch line, we could splice it and have a permanent repair and continue using it for 6-8 years,
Okay.
right? So
Gotcha.
in longevity, nowhere near as bad as what people thought. So the one on our training truck, our 100 series Land Cruiser, has well over 10,000 pulls on it.
Wow, okay.
Wow.
And if it's taken care of, you can get 6 to 8 years out of it, no
Wow,
problem.
okay. All right, what else we got in there?
All
Are we
right.
out?
So bow shackles, or some of us like to call them D-rings, right? There is a difference, and that's this just because I'm nerdy and geeky about recovery. A bow shackle actually has this bow where it bows out right here, and it's specifically made for straps, right? So the eye of your strap could come off at an angle, and it would go down underneath a pallet or a load and back up. These are from overhead lifting. So that bow is specifically for the fabric eye of a strap, where a D-ring would be straight up and down on the sides, and that's specifically for chain and picking straight up where a load is in line,
Gotcha.
right? So there is a difference, nerdy, geeky stuff, right? Big thing you want to pay attention to is we call them screw pin bow shackles, because we use a pin that screws into place, right? Versus using the pins that are just a pin with a clip on the edge,
Yeah.
because we always want those threads to help hold it. Because now if it gets side loaded, those threads are going to keep it in place, where if we just have a pin with a clip on the side, they would separate.
It can pop that cotter pin.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct. So always having that screw pin. Now, this is where we're getting away from minimum brake strength and stuff like that. You're going to see a working load limit, a number, and a T. The T stands for tons. And a lot of people are going to be like, well, it's only 4 3/4 tons. Well, that's because they take that minimum brake strength and they divide it by a safety factor, which is normally 6 for bow shackles. And that's how they get that working load limit, or safe working load limit.
Gotcha.
And that's mostly from the overhead lifting industry, right?
Okay.
Now, when you're using these, we kind of have a little joke, and I think you actually have a sticker in there. Don't be a screw up, screw down, because if you're working with this at nighttime and you're screwing up with this pin, right, and you're in the mud or snow or whatever, and suddenly you're gonna drop that pin. Now you got a paperweight, right? So don't be a screw up, screw down.
when you
Now
put it
that
on.
pin is in place, right? And now we can tighten it down.
Yeah.
You're gonna see two schools of thought, right? One is that you should tighten this down and do the recovery. And that's from overhead lifting industry techniques, right? They tighten them down and they actually have a rigger's tool that they would undo it with, okay? Or a pair of pliers. In the recovery world, a lot of times they recommend backing off a quarter to a half turn with the pin because we're more dynamic in our movement, so this can move up and down and it can tighten on itself.
Yeah.
And it'd be really hard
Make
to
it
get
really
apart.
hard to get off.
Yeah.
Especially if you got muddy fingers and things like that.
100%, right? Cold, snow, right? We can feel how cold this is today
Yeah,
as
for
we're
sure.
trying to work with it. But a lot of times, like if you look at organizations like the International Four-Wheel Drive Trainers Association, stuff like that, they do recommend tightening it all the way down for the full capacity.
And just using like a screwdriver to put
Yep.
through there to get
Put
loose.
it through there, a pair of pliers, anything like that to back it off.
Okay. Are we empty?
We're getting close.
Is that all we got?
Oh, this is actually an extremely good idea. And most people would not think about this,
I think it's in
right?
there by accident, to be honest.
No, babe.
No,
we
I
planned
meant
that.
to do that.
That was 100% part of our recovery gear.
So the reason I say that is two things. Number one, we rely on cell phones a lot, right?
Yeah.
Rely on cell phones a lot. But number two, winch controllers. A lot of wireless winch controllers now, and they're rechargeable. And how many of us are just taking our winch controller, putting it in our center console or our recovery bag or whatever and leaving it there? Whereas if we have something like that, number one, if we're outside the vehicle and our winch controller's dead, if we can plug that in and still use it while we're doing the recovery, great, right? It's a huge thing to be able to do. So keeping one of those at least on hand in the vehicle is a great idea in the recovery scene.
Well,
Right.
Mike, you're probably going to hate me because on the way up here, I was wondering, I wonder if my winch controller has batteries. So we may be using the old manual on it. We'll have to see.
Yeah. So some other knickknacks and stuff in here, but overall, I think we're pretty
We're
good.
done.
We're done.
That's all we got. All right. So looking at that collection of things, what would you say we are missing?
Really, the number one big thing that I would add to this kit that you're missing would be like a hitch link or a recovery hitch point. So a lot of people don't necessarily think about the hitch on the back of the vehicle, right? But we hear stories of don't use a tow ball, don't use a receiver hitch or anything like that. What we actually recommend is using a slide-in receiver hitch recovery point that goes in there. And now we can use that because that is the strongest point on the back of our vehicle. So if we're doing
Gotcha.
a kinetic recovery, this is what we want to use because that hitch does two things. Number one, it distributes the load between both frame rails, right,
Okay.
of the vehicle. So it's spreading that load out to both sides. And number two, because it's used for towing, right, it bypasses on modern vehicles the crush cans in the rear of the frame. So now it's going directly to the frame where sometimes our bumpers may not do that. Right?
Gotcha.
So we do recommend one of these with a good hitch pin. There are some old school thoughts of just using a hitch pin, but you can bend these. These are a double shear. So we do recommend having something like this. And a good one, you know, again, staying away from mikesbasement.com, but a good one like this, number one, that has rating on it, but I like this one because you can actually rotate it. So if we're doing a recovery and I'm a little off center, right? Maybe I'm a little off to the side, then I can put it this way. Or you can see I've got cross-drilled pins there if a vehicle's a little higher than me or a little lower than me, and it can rotate off. And it's got a
Gotcha.
nice bevel on it for your soft shackle and a much larger kind of hole.
Okay.
So it's nice to have. But these, especially in kinetic recoveries, right?
Okay.
And most people carry one. I actually recommend carrying two, one for yourself and one for the stuck vehicle because they're probably not going to have
Gotcha.
one.
Yeah. And that's something you never think about. You always think about what to put in your vehicle, but you don't think of, hey, I don't know what the other
the
vehicle that
person
might have to rescue me is going to have. So
Yeah.
good.
And we see that a lot in the overland world, right? You're out west, you're laying between the lakes, and you come up and you know dad and the kids or whoever, they slid the minivan off the side of the road and you're going to, they're not going to have recovery gear, right? You know, so having a little bit of extra stuff that'll work for that.
Well, that's awesome.
But that would be the only thing I would add. And then I would look at kind of expanding what you already have in the kit, right? So like I carry 2 tree straps. I carry 4 soft shackles. You have 2 bow shackles, that's all I carry. And then I typically carry like 2 pulley blocks to go along with that. And a lot of that just depends on how far you want to get into rigging, right? So if we think about like a kinetic recovery, the bare minimum that we would be able to rig in a kinetic recovery, we need kinetic rope and a minimum of 2 soft shackles, right? One for the stuck vehicle, one for the recovery vehicle. So just thinking about like those bare minimums, but if we get more fancy, as we'll see when I talk about my fancy drawings and diagrams, right? We can even get into where we need 3, 4 soft shackles in a kinetic recovery.
Okay.
So just expanding those, and I've actually got a list of kind of our recommended recovery kits to give to you guys, and you can share out to your viewers.
Okay.
Perfect. All right, guys. So you heard Mike say that our kit's not doing too bad, but we are getting some marks off for our kind of cheaper tree saver here. But he was able to find a rigger's tag, and so you can see on this tree saver how much more information it gives you about the product than our little made in China guy over here. So you get much more information here. So you really do get what you pay for. And if you think about recovery being sometimes a life and death situation, is it really worth saving that extra, 30, 40 bucks? I don't think so.
100%. I tell everybody in our classes that recovery is the most dangerous thing we're going to do off-road, right? Normally we're outside the vehicle. The vehicles are designed for safety, airbags, roll cages, all that good stuff. Once we step outside that vehicle, we start doing recovery and stuff like that, it is going to be more dangerous. And when things can come loose, right, and they can comply, and we've all seen the YouTube videos of what happens, right? So saving that little bit of extra money just to say, hey, I got a cheaper strap, well, that's not necessarily a great idea, right? And you can normally tell the difference. Like if you feel both of these straps, you can feel the difference in thickness. You can feel the difference in weight.
You can just see
right?
it. You don't even have to touch it.
Yeah. So, really paying attention to what you're purchasing and being an educated buyer, right? That's what we want to do, is we want to be an educated buyer.
So Mike, you were talking about the safety and seeing the YouTube videos of bad things happen. Well, that's something that we've seen ourselves. And to be honest, because we were so new at this, one thing I've always been interested in, but I've kind of been afraid of it because they say you really need to know what you're doing, is a kinetic rope. And you've mentioned that quite a bit. So can you show us a kinetic rope and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So this kinetic rope right here, this is one from Yankum, right? Before we really delve into like the tag and all that type of stuff, what is a kinetic rope, right? And even back up further than that, what's a kinetic recovery? Because there's 2 types of recovery that we can do. There's what we call a static recovery, and then there's what we call a kinetic recovery. Static is going to be like winching, high lift jack, or just a tow where we're not using vehicle momentum. Kinetic recovery is when we are actually using momentum between vehicles to get that vehicle out. And it's very common because it's fast, right? It's easy. Cost-wise, typically it's low entry point.
And what type of situation would you use a kinetic rope like?
Vehicle-to-vehicle extraction, right? So let's say that you guys are out on an overland trip and you get bogged down into some mud.
Okay.
Another vehicle can hook up to you, and now even if they're a smaller vehicle, they can develop a little bit of momentum, a little slack in the line, and they can get running and they can pop you out, right? So they're able to put a lot more force than if we were to just hook up a winch and try and pull.
So it helps, does it help break the suction of the mud?
It does.
Gotcha,
It does.
just that pop. Okay, perfect.
Yep. And we use kinetic stuff, right? We term it kinetic, but basically we use big bungee cords, right?
Okay.
So snatch straps and kinetic ropes. Kinetic ropes are always going to be better than your snatch straps or kinetic straps because they have more stretch. Typically a kinetic rope has 30-35% stretch, and that stretch is designed so that when this line goes tight, right, it's going to absorb that initial shock load and store that energy in there and then transfer it to that stuck vehicle to help pop it out and break that suction.
And just for anyone new and they're not familiar with kinetic, when would be a time that you would not want to use a kinetic rope?
Typically, I would not use a kinetic rope if I don't have good attachment points, right? So that would be for starters. Let's say that we only have like factory, because there's differences, right? Most manufacturers do not put recovery points on a vehicle. They're either tow points or tie down points.
Okay.
So I would not use kinetic recovery on those, except for Jeeps, right? Jeeps front hooks are technically recovery points.
Okay.
The other time I wouldn't is if, let's say, we're high centered like on a rock. The last thing we want to do is drag ourselves across a rock,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
But kinetic ropes come to use really when we're in soft surfaces like sand, mud, or high centered.
And you wouldn't want to use it when you're just kind of hauling or pulling another vehicle, right?
You could, yeah,
could?
100%, 100%. If we're just doing like a tow extraction, yeah, I would still use a kinetic rope.
Okay.
Now we obviously, in those scenarios, we could use something like just a standard strap because we're not using momentum, but always using a kinetic rope just gives us that little bit of leeway.
Yeah, it's not as rough on the vehicle either, right? It doesn't.
Yeah. So one thing people don't think about, right, in kinetic recoveries is modern vehicles. So starting in like 2007, we saw it with Jeeps, right? And Toyotas had it before then, but even now, front and rear, we have crushed cans in the frame. So if you get an accident in your Jeep, the frame actually collapses to absorb that shock load. Same thing, if you get rear-ended, it collapses. So if we start pulling on those things too hard, we can actually tweak the frame. So having something that absorbs that initial shock load, that kind of whiplash that you would get, so that it's not as much of an instantaneous shock load to the vehicle, will help those crushed cans and not tweak the frames.
Okay.
So it's a good benefit to have a kinetic rope even in a tow, right?
Nice.
So the other big thing is with kinetic ropes, moving heavier vehicles. So take for instance, if I'm out with you guys and you're in your Jeep, right? And I'm in my big diesel Ram and I bury my big diesel Ram. If you try to winch me out, you're just gonna pull your Jeep, right?
To you, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas here, now you can get a running head start and you can put a lot more force into it than you would with your winch. So that's another huge benefit to kinetic ropes.
So it's definitely worth having in the arsenal.
100%, 100%. And they're fast, right? It's a whole lot faster rigging this up than getting out and doing winching or high lift jack or whatever it may be. So that's a lot of the benefit, but we don't necessarily want to think about it as being fast because we still want to slow down and work our way through the recovery.
Okay. All right, so Mike covered recovery gear, and next we're going to go into some of the recovery techniques. Mike, tell us, share your class, share some information about your class. Like, first of all, where can they find your class?
So we list all of our classes on our website, morrisonsoutdooradventures.com, as well as our Facebook page and our Instagram. So you can see all the classes we offer there. Specifically our recovery class, it's a full day class. And we used to call it full day vehicle recovery. Now it's kind of an intro to recovery because we do have an advanced class where we actually take vehicles out, we get them stuck, and we make people work their way through recovering.
Oh, exciting.
So the full day recovery class, we cover everything from winching, high lift jack, kinetic, as well as traction mats and like what we call traction extractions, just towing vehicles.
Now, clearly these classes are great for beginners, but what about someone that they've been off-roading for a little while? Can you think they can learn something from your class?
I do, because recovery for 25 plus years did not change. But in the last 5 to 8 years, we've seen huge changes in the recovery world. New gear coming to market, new changes in processes, and most importantly, now with the overlanding world, vehicles are getting heavier, and that's why we're seeing damage, right? So some of the old processes that we used just don't work anymore. So I do recommend at least a brush up, right? Or at least developing some skills like our advanced class where you're actually going out and using those skills and practicing. And I tell everybody, practice, even if it's just in your driveway rigging, practice, because it changes when you are stuck and your adrenaline's pumping and you're nervous, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, I gotta hurry up and get unstuck, right? What equipment do we use? So that way you have some muscle memory.
And like you said it earlier in conversation that overlanding has become overloading.
Yeah.
And many of us need to learn how to now use our rigs overloaded and use them properly. So cool. All right. So what are we looking at here?
So my wonderful drawings, right? I'm by no way an artist, but this would be just kind of standard rigging. And what I like to do is see one, do one, teach one from the military, right? Is first off show kind of some basic rigging. Then we would go out and actually go through the process of making those connections so we can put hands on it, and then actually going through and doing a recovery, a mock recovery, right? So here we've got a recovery vehicle up top, and we've got our stuck vehicle down below. right? And our basic rigging, what I've done in the back here is we're actually, instead of connecting to like one recovery point on the back, we're actually connecting to the hitch of a vehicle, right? Using that hitch link or recovery hitch point in the back. Then we've got our kinetic rope, right? We always, if we're gonna do any type of momentum extraction, we want that kinetic rope in the equation for that stretch, right? But this is where it gets a little different down here, because we're pulling off the front of a vehicle, so we're actually connecting to both recovery points. But how do we do that? We can use what we call a bridle, which could be a tree strap, it could be a short kinetic rope, it could be a lot of different things. Typically I use tree straps, but what that does is now it equalizes the load between both of those front recovery points. And that way we're not just pulling from one, and we talked about the crush cans in the frame, it'll distribute that load to both frame rails evenly. Okay. So now if we get a little too aggressive with the kinetic recovery, we don't have to worry about the vehicle quite as much, nice. Right? Okay. Adds in some fail safes to the equation. Now, one thing I try to do as much as possible in kinetic recoveries is I try to use as much soft as I can. I stay away from metal objects. I try not to use bow shackles if I can, or D-rings. But if I have a sharp recovery point, obviously we're gonna have to use those. So we just try to stay as safe as possible with that. If we can use soft shackle, that's always my first go-to.
So that's ideally what we're gonna put here is the soft shackle first, and if we don't have that as an option, then we would go to a D or a bow ring.
Correct, yeah. Most recovery points, right, they have those hard 90-degree edges on them. Right. And that can damage or cause a soft shackle to fail, okay. Especially if we get too aggressive, right, in the kinetic recovery. So therefore, we would use a bow shackle. Okay.
So that's why the super shackle with the hard cover over there from Yankum is so good. It can help mitigate some of that damage.
It can, because a lot of manufacturers have started beveling those edges now to make it better, but not all of them. And you never know. If you come up on a stuck vehicle, you don't know what they have for recovery points and stuff like that. Yeah. But even outside of the abrasion thing, soft fabrics have to have a certain amount of radius to bend around, or they start to lose strength. Okay. So this is actually awesome because we'll get two types of connections. We can do a bow shackle as well as a soft shackle. So the cool thing about that will be, you can kind of show your customers, but this would be something that I wouldn't use a soft shackle on. Right. Right, because of that hard edge right there.
And at the end of the day, the reason most of them are like that is it would be so expensive to get in there and machine those out, I guess.
It would. Now companies are starting to do that, right? They are getting better. All
right, guys, so what is going on? What are we doing?
So we are going to learn a little bit about rigging now. So we are going to rig up a recovery with a kinetic rope, right? So kinetic ropes are, kinetic recoveries are the most dangerous style recoveries because we're using momentum. We're putting a lot of force into it, so we want to be really sure about our rigging. Most importantly, we want to be sure about our gear, right? It's really important to have proper gear.
So we have chosen kinetic rope from Yankum ropes. And the reason that we have chosen this, Jeremy?
Well, I'll go ahead and tell you, because sometimes you just need a good yank, guys. No, honestly, the reason we chose those, we try to buy American when we can. And when it comes to something like this, they've made great strides to stay in America. And so this is all hand spliced. This is the 30-foot 7/8 rope. What is the minimum break strength on this
So the
thing?
minimum break strength on this is 28,600 pounds. And Mike has just shared with us that you want to be around 3 times your weight.
3 to 4 times
3 to 4
your
times
vehicle's weight.
And we estimate 5,000 to 6,000 pounds is what we have. That's one thing that we want to do is try to get our rigs weighed just to be sure. So we should be within range on this rope.
Perfect. All right. You gonna get us set up, Mike?
Yeah. So we're gonna simulate right now that the Jeep is stuck right here. So we're gonna learn about rigging off of that. Now, a lot of times if we're pulling off the front of a vehicle, we want to set up a bridle, right? We do the bridle so that we can pull from both sides of the frame rail. So we're gonna go ahead and come over here. We're gonna connect one of our D-rings or bow shackles over here. Go ahead and tighten it down there. Now, before we connect this to the other side, we've got to make a connection through our rope. Now, one of the easiest things to do in order to do that is just feed it through, right?
Gotcha.
Just feed it through, because they do have a stiffer eye right here, so we're not really going to get any damage out of that, and we've got a good abrasion guard, so we don't really want to add another connection point in if we can.
Because that's just another failure point.
Correct. Then I'll let you hook this up there.
And guys, I just want to say that Lagatha is not stuck. She could get out of that if she wanted to. Don't let them tell you she's stuck. Hey, no, hey.
Now you said not to tighten it all the way in this situation, correct?
Well, so if we do tighten it all the way, it's going to get stuck. We do have a pair of pliers that we can undo it. There's 2 schools of thought. If we tighten it all the way, they say that we do have 100% of our capacity, but it's going to get stuck. If we back it off a quarter to a half turn, then it can rotate on there and it's not going to tighten on itself. But there is a chance that we've got slightly reduced capacity, but it's so little, I don't think it's going to matter.
Okay.
Right?
Perfect.
Awesome. Now, we go to our next connection point at the vehicle. Do you guys want to use your...
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's use your soft shackle.
We've got our new, we've never gotten to use it. This is the new Yankum Super Shackle. And I think they call it that because it has that big protective sleeve over it. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah. So we're going to use this recovery point on the back.
My hands are not working very well.
We gotta
These are great gloves,
you some better
they're
gloves.
just not very warm.
So sometimes we'll pull this out real fast, then we'll slide it through because they don't like to always fit through everything, which is nice when you have the removable ones.
It seems to thread really easy.
It does.
Doesn't it?
That is very nice. All right.
Sometimes you just got to take a glove off.
That's right. All right. So we are connected.
And so that's what you were talking about. You want the pull to be right there at the ball.
knot, right? So
We want it here.
We don't ever want it here or like in the middle. We always want that pull so that now when it pulls, right, it's pulling the loop against the knot.
Yeah.
Right there below the knot, not against it, right?
Not. And then you've got your protected ends both here, so that's keeping both rope and soft shackle kind of safe.
Correct.
All right.
So, in thinking about this now, and this is probably one of the biggest kind of pet peeves from trainers, is this is what we would consider a live line now, meaning that it could go tight at any time, even if the trucks aren't running, right? Let's say that, you're down here driving this one, you're on a hill, and suddenly the brakes give out, right? That truck could roll backwards, this line would go tight. So any live line, we do not step over, right?
Yep.
Because if this goes
No
tight,
one wants neutered.
right? I'm not Michael anymore, I'm Michelle.
Yeah.
Any live lines, we step on them when we cross them. So if it does go tight right now, it's just gonna push me one side.
It's going to throw you off.
Right? So we consider that a live line. A dead line would just be once it's disconnected, right? Also, kinetic recoveries, again, can be very dangerous. Think about when you're stuck, right? What happens when you're stuck? Your adrenaline spikes, you start to make bad decisions, you start to really rush. So we really want to slow down, especially with kinetic recovery. One of the biggest things about what we teach is progressive aggression. Okay, we don't want to just go in and go full send, right? 0 to 10, we want to make sure that we're just trying to pull the vehicle out with the least amount of effort. Okay, least amount of effort. So the first pull that I would always do would be a tow, where we're just going to take the line tight and we're going to try to pull that vehicle forward. If that doesn't work, once we break traction with the recovery vehicle, then we're going to back up a little bit, roughly about a third the length of the rope, and now we're going to get a little more aggressive. 2 to 3 miles an hour, maybe 4, right? But no more. And we're going to try to drive and see if we can pop that vehicle out. Both vehicles need to be in drive, trying to drive, even the stuck vehicle, right?
Okay.
Once we're actually moving. So that way we can get the full use of that initial kind of bump with the kinetic rope. The biggest mistake people make is they anticipate that bump and they release the throttle and re-engage. Always drive through that bump when it goes tight.
So she's not hammering down, she's just nice and easy.
Nice and easy, right? Okay. Nice and easy. If on that go, we still don't get the vehicle out, now we're gonna back up 1/2 to 2/3 the length of the rope. We're gonna get a little more aggressive, 5 to 6 miles an hour, no more, right? We never go over that amount, and we're gonna try to pop that vehicle out, right?
So the videos we've seen where they're like hammering down in that front puller, don't do that.
Yep.
Okay.
I always say that we need to think about our throttle like a volume knob, not an on-off switch.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
So
Yep.
that
Nice
way
and gradual.
It's 0 through 10, not 1 or 10.
Yeah.
Right?
Perfect.
So what we're gonna do here, though, we're gonna simulate. We're gonna have a driver in the Ram. We'll have have you in your Jeep there, and we're gonna do just like we've already gone through the tow. We're gonna try to actually pop it out with a pretty decent little bump. So we're gonna back up about 1/2, get about 3 to 4 miles an hour, and drive through and bump it out, right?
All right, perfect. And this is a situation where you would use those radios. You would be, connecting with her and telling her, hey, here I go. So keep those radios in your bag, guys.
That's 100% it. The radios do make life easier. If you don't have radios, it's not as great, right? It's not as great an option, but you can do the horn trick where 1 beep of the horn, are you ready? 2 beeps, yes. 1 beep, no. Right?
Okay.
Nice.
Didn't know that. That's
Doesn't
nice.
work 100%, right? But we do want to have some way to communication, and radios are always best,
Perfect.
right? You want to hop in, Chris?
Don't break my Jeep, baby. Hey, it's a baby rock for her.
Yeah, Sarah's memory keeps resetting. All right, Chris, you got to drive through the bump. So give her about, 3-4 miles an hour.
Well, that was
All right.
easy. Nice.
You want to do one a little bit more aggressive?
Sure.
All right. Let's back it back up.
Back it back up, babe. He's gonna do one aggressive for you. It's gonna give you a hard yank. Dude, if that was my company, I would have the dirtiest ads ever.
Oh, I know. Probably make a pretty fortune. All right, Chris, go back. About another, keep coming. About another vehicle length. Give me right around that 6-7 mile an hour range.
So even when it yanks, it's still so calm for the passenger of that Jeep. Like, do you feel that?
Well, I feel it, but I kept anticipating a
Hold on.
yank, like a hard pull.
So-
I was nervous about, okay, this is gonna be rough, but no, it's nice and smooth.
It's nice and smooth. It's like, you don't even hear any kind of like pull or. She's driving it like a damn Miss Daisy. All right. Still almost Miss Daisy. All right. What did you think about getting yanked on, babe?
I like it. I feel like a dude.
So what did you really think about it? Was it a hard? Was it a hard?
It was much smoother than I anticipated. I actually anticipated like the jerk, but it was very, very smooth to get pulled out and recovered. So it didn't feel as aggressive. The Jeep felt much safer. Everything felt really good. The whole crush can thing, you don't feel that, again, that
jar.
Yeah, that jar.
And so guys, looking around out here, you know, you saw the pit that Lagatha was not stuck in. And then if you come around, there's these moguls here that can put you off camber. But Mike, you were saying this is just a temporary facility. So tell us what you got going on.
Yeah, so one of the things we do with our driving classes is we want people to actually drive, right? We want them to get in and experience situations they could see on the trails, whether that's rocks, cross-axle, spin outs, things like that. So what we do is we build these purpose-built obstacle courses that create those situations, and then we actually take them out on the trail. We're working with one of our trainers now, Chris. He's got a facility, 34 acres, over in Mount Sterling, where we're going to be building a much larger obstacle course, and we're actually about 15 minutes from the Danube Backcountry Byway. So we'll be able to do in-class training in the classroom, go right to the obstacle course, then go right out onto the trail. So that way, you know, you'll get basically a controlled environment, and then we're going to go right onto the trail to actually do driving. But we'll have full obstacle courses, and then when we do our recovery classes and get into our advanced recovery classes, we'll actually have locations where we can really stick vehicles, big mud holes, rocks, things like that, where we can work through those processes, as well as campsites and all that other cool stuff.
Nice. So thank you so much for your time today and teaching us how to use some of this stuff properly without shattering our windshields and faces and, you know, all that stuff. So thank you so much for the time. But I know you said they can check you out on the web, but are you also, where else are you online where they can find you?
So Facebook, Instagram, Morrison's Outdoor Adventures, as well as YouTube, Morrison's Outdoor Adventures, and then morrisonsoutdooradventures.com.
And I'm just going to ask, I don't know yet, but I see some cool merch. Do you actually sell merch as well?
We do have shirts.
With the logo?
We do have shirts with the logo, hats as well.
Right.
So we've got some different merch, and then we do some seasonal stuff also.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, guys. Babe, you want to close us out?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for watching. If you have watched to the very end, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Let us know that you were here. Also, drop us a comment. Let us know what you think about the video. And if you have not already, be sure to subscribe to Down South Adventures for more adventures. See you later.